So how do you get from here to Norwalk on the other side of the world? Well, it's pretty easy, really. You just get up really early in the morning, take a plane, and then a bus, and then an airport, and then a plane, and then another airport, and then another plane, and then a train, nice, and then eat some pizza that's bigger than your head, a little bit of walking, another train, and then another train, and then you're at Norwalk. Easy. Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic. This is the event report for how my dual spinner vertical melty brain RUD performed at Norwalk Havoc's September meet. And we will talk about this in a minute because we will get there. There is a lot to cover first. And the first thing I am actually going to say about this is that Norwalk is huge. It is just a massive facility that they have going on there, and so much so that I've actually filmed an entire kind of like building tour effectively, which will come out next week because it is very difficult to convey to you through this camera how massive the facility is there. And I'm gonna try. I don't think I'm gonna do a very good job, but that is something that will happen next week. And the event did not actually start on the Saturday that the live stream for Norwalk Havoc happened. Instead, it actually started on the Friday. There is a bump in day. You're allowed to get in around about lunchtime to bump in, get through safety, just work on the robot as you need to. Now, thankfully, I had RUD pretty much working before I got there. The only thing I hadn't done is tuned the robot. So I actually ran in the cage that they took to open source. They had it up in the safety area and were allowing people to run robots in it. So I actually got a chance to spin RUD up and get the weapon spinning and translate and just do a good solid test of the robot on the Friday, which was perfect. It allowed me to actually see this. And that was really good to see. It's very hard to kind of pinpoint what I'm looking at when I'm looking at the melty brain, but that spin up test was very stable. The heading light was fairly stable. I was able to trim the heading in to within a few degrees wobble, which is pretty good, especially as the last version of this never got the heading light anywhere near that stable. And we're basically running exactly the same code, just with the wheel reference changed slightly. And yeah, it actually seemed to work, which was really good. That is, it was a huge weight off, to be perfectly honest. Having traveled all that way to get there, I was very gratified that the thing actually spun up at all, which was really nice. Anyway, that's, I think, enough waffling about the behind the scenes stuff. You all care about the fights, so let's get to the fights. My first fight up was up against a vertical spinner called Staying Alive. What I didn't realize until I got to the box was that Staying Alive is a massive vert. It is more an uppercut than a hypershock, and I never fought something like that before. I'll also very, very quickly give a big shout out to Devin, who helped film this particular fight. I had some people who were there who were going to help me film fights, but unfortunately when this fight came up, they were all busy and could not come down to cage side with me. Devin, who's been watching my channel for a while, actually was there at the arena side holding a Team Panic sign, and I saw him and said, "Hey, please film this for me," and he very graciously did. So we've got some footage from him, we've got some footage from NHRL. I may splice them together, I may not, but thank you so much to him for his help here. And with that, let's watch this fight. Oh boy. Okay, so a lot happened in that fight. Let's break this down a little slowly here. First of all, there were two big shots, like right out the gate, and in the second one of those exchanges, something small and red and metallic flew off one of the robots. In the heat of the moment, I honestly thought that was the nut that holds on my weapon pulleys flying off one of my weapon motors, and I thought I was sunk 2 shots in. I thought he'd somehow managed to snipe a weapon motor, and that would mean that effectively I could not spin the weapons and melty at the same time, because, well, I would only have 1 vert, and so, yeah, I would be sunk effectively. And I mean, I did end up with 1 vert, but again, we'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, so I thought I was going to be stuck, but then the melty kept going and the verts were still running, and I was like, that must not be me then. And it took a second for me to realize that, in fact, it wasn't me, and in fact, it was him. And it was basically, I'd hit him hard enough that his weapon had bent inside the frame and taken out his own pulley off his motor, which is a common problem for verts of that size, especially if the pulley is inside the radius of the vert, or in actual fact, any spinning weapon can have that happen if the pulley is inside the radius of the weapon. And unfortunately, that is what happened to him in that particular exchange. But like I said, for a second there, was very, very worried that that was me, and that, yeah, 2 shots into my NHRL debut, I was not going to be able to do the things that I wanted to be able to do. Having said that, we did. We got to do the things we wanted to do, and this version of the melty, I think, is performing better, because the exchanges after that second shot, the ones where his weapon are down, he is popping up into the air as well as being pushed away. So we're getting a vertical component and a horizontal component to the exchange, which I think means that these verts were getting engagement and popping him into the air, which is good. Were they really strong, powerful vert shots? No. Were they being overpowered by the melty shot? Yes. Were they there? I think so, which is good. I mean, that kind of proves that this system is doing something anyway, and that, yeah, we are getting some element of vert in our melty brain hit, which look, I'm still a little, like, I'm doing this for fun. I don't think this is ever going to be, like, super competitive, but it is interesting giving somebody 2 different types of hit at the same time. And look, it may actually be an advantage eventually, once I get it working a little better than I had it working here, I think. And I say that because halfway, or not even halfway, a third of the way into this fight, one of the wheels starts going the wrong way. Now, I do not know how or why this happened. It could be anything from the code in the melty brain not working correctly because it's taken a big hit and it's got a voltage spike and it's just caused some weirdness in the code in the brain. It could be the ESC having issues, and it could be the motor itself having issues. These particular motors that are in here are YOLO drive, and they have been through many, many, many fights. So it's possible that there is like a weirdness in the motor itself, which is causing the motor to reverse, because brushless motors, and especially brushless ESCs, are just pulsing signals out, and if a motor misses a pulse, it can spin the motor back in reverse, and the same set of pulses will just keep the motor going in the wrong direction. And that was what's happening here. That's why we shot across the box in a straight line effectively, is that one of the motors reversed, meaning that they were both just pointing in the same direction. Obviously not a good thing for meltying. Now, the way this melty works, you need to have the weapons down to be able to spin the whole robot up, and then once the robot is up to speed, then you can spin the melty up. So as I was struggling with the switches and stuff, trying to get the melty to stop driving in one direction and to spin back up again, I had the weapons down to facilitate all of that stuff happening, and that meant that he was pinning me into the wall and basically making full advantage of the fact that I was not a melty brain at that point in time. He did very well keeping me up against the wall, stopping me from spinning back up, and of course, because I'm running YOLO drive, even a small amount of pressure keeping me into the wall was enough to overpower these motors and stop me from really doing anything. Then I was like, wait a second, I've got 2 verts. He keeps pinning me into the wall. Why not just turn the verts on and keep him away from me with the weapons that are on the robot? And that is exactly what happened. I turned the weapons on, and he started taking hits from that, which meant he backed off a little bit and gave me time to get everything reset and start spinning again, which thankfully we did actually do. But of course, because we'd spun the weapons up and then we're spinning the melty up, we got chaos mode, which I like Chaos Mode. Chaos Mode is fun. I mean, I built a dual vert melty. Of course I like Chaos Modes. This is what this robot does. And with it bouncing around all over the place, I got a really nice shot on him by bouncing up into the air and hitting him at the height that tipped him over onto his face. Now, the way NHRL works, they have their house robots, Brett the Brick, and other various iterations of Brett, and you can call for an unstick. However, when you call for an unstick, as soon as you've called for that unstick, anything that unsticks you counts that unstick attempt as completed, and you only get one per fight. So if you can stick your opponent and then have them call for an unstick and then hit them and they come unstuck, their unstick attempt is now used and you got a free hit on them. So you basically kind of double win in that scenario, and that is exactly what happened here. When he got stuck, he called for an unstick, you saw Brett move towards him, I went over and hit him, he got unstuck, and therefore his unstick attempt was done. So if I'd managed to stick him at that point, from that point on, he would not be able to call for another unstick. That was slightly unintentional, and admittedly I'm more kind of talking up the fact that was a good idea in hindsight, but it was still a good thing that happened in this particular fight. Then of course, yeah, he got unstuck. I was upside down and still spinning. This particular version, I had a thick top plate on. I had a thicker top plate than I'd ever run before. And with the googly eye was actually touching the ground more than the wheels were. So we were semi-stuck upside down. However, we'd lost one of the weapon belts on one of the motors, which meant that any small amount of turn caused gyro effect and allowed the whole robot to kind of rock and hit the ground with the weapon and get some wheel engagement and stuff, which meant that I could still kind of drive and still kind of get into a melty state, but it was definitely limping in some ways, I would say. And I mean, if I got into a proper melty state, like once the robot was spun up, I could maybe translate a little bit, but it was going to be hindered by the fact that I was effectively meltying on a googly eye. I mean, look, it still worked. It was just definitely not what I wanted to have happen, and it was reduced movement, shall we say, going into the kind of final 30 seconds of this fight. Then of course, we got not much more in this fight really. We did make it all the way through to a judge's decision, and at the end of NHRL fights, they have a movement and weapons check for the judges. So as I was able to still get up to meltying speed, I was able to say that my drive was still working, and because I still had a belt on one side, I could still say that I had one of two weapons working, which meant that going into our final judge's scorecard, I had less damage than he did, because he had no weapon working and still had his drive. I had my drive and one of two weapons, so technically only half my weapons working. But that's still better than no weapons working at all, and is why I think I won this judge's decision, because I don't think I got any control points there. I probably got some aggression points, but I definitely got some damage points out, which is very, very cool. I think that's the first time this has performed well enough to be awarded damage points, which I am very, very happy about. Of course, something needed to be done about the top plate, so between fights I used the machine shop that NHRL has, jumped on a bandsaw, cut a new top plate out of thinner 3mm HDPE, which gave me clearance to run a googly eye so I could actually spin upside down in my next fight, because the way NHRL works, that was a kind of like proving grounds fight, and if you won that, you went straight through into the bracket. If you lost it, you had a kind of redemption fight. If you won your redemption, you're into the bracket. If not, you're out entirely. And once you're in the bracket, if you lose, you're out entirely. So I figured from this point on, I needed to put my best foot forward, and my best foot was going to be one that meant that I wasn't going to get stuck upside down and could still melty properly. So the kind of 10 minutes of cutting a new top plate, although this one is kind of rough and a little bit hacky because it was done, like I said, on a bandsaw out of thin HDPE, which probably isn't the best idea. It did allow me to melty upside down, which was really a good thing. Especially going into our next fight. So our next fight up is against Stag Beetlebot. It is a very, very small vertical spinner and four-wheel drive and very, very quick.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thanks to NHRL and Seth Schaefer from Just Cause Robotics there for the footage for this particular fight. Now this one was interesting because Stag definitely drives and fights way more like a control bot than like a vert does. There was a lot of kind of pushing me around and pinning me, and I mean, I guess the charging like directly across the arena straight into me is very much a vert thing to be doing. But I don't know, I felt like I was fighting more of a control bot in this fight than anything else, especially with the fact that he is ridiculously quick. That box rush across the arena was very effective. I was nowhere near spun up before he got to me. In fact, I was barely moving and he was at me already, which is not a good place to be when you're running a melty brain and you need to be spinning to be effective, especially this one where, the weapons need to be spun up last, which means I can't even throw the weapons up and then throw the melty on. I really have to get the melty up first before getting the weapons up to speed, which I think is the disadvantage of the vert system. Running the horizontals, you can get the horizontals up to speed whenever you like, and so you can get them up to speed fast and early and then spin the whole robot up, which gives you a little bit more defense against something like that box rush, which would have been handy in this particular instance. And look, there is a lot of exchanges in the first kind of 30 seconds that are just him charging at me. I am trying to melty and translate around the arena, but he is way faster than me. And I mean, that is kind of the case with a lot of melties, especially a melty like mine, which is not a very tuned and refined melty. My translation speed is not the best at this point in time. It's something I want to work on with my code for melties, but I'm not there yet. So a well-driven fast robot is driving circles around me, and that is exactly what was happening for the first 30 seconds of this fight. And then something unfortunate happens. I hit him really hard, and that happens. The robot starts to separate. Now, the way this is separated, it is separated towards the weapon, which when I first saw this as it came out of the box, I honestly thought that this had happened when I was upside down later on in the fight, and that I'd spun the wrong way and I'd hit it from this side to cause the weapon to lever, like this weapon package to lever towards the weapon. But no, this was happening when I was spinning the right way. I slammed the weapon directly into him and somehow managed to lever into the weapon. I don't know how that happened really. I think maybe just the kind of momentum of the back half of this weapon package just levered forwards as everything else stopped in front of it. And yeah, I mean, look, the way this happened is that there are heat insert nuts holding this blue metal piece into the rest of the chassis. That was a bad idea. There was not enough plastic in front of them, and they have just pulled straight through. And probably, in fact, pulled straight through over the course of 2 fights. And yeah, it was just a cumulative damage that I didn't pick up because I didn't actually feel like I had too much damage after the staying alive fight, so I didn't do any maintenance or repair other than making that new top plate, because that was a decisive issue coming out of that fight, and I didn't see these coming loose. And in actual fact, the other one is still totally fine and seems rock solid, but I bet once I pull this thing apart, I will see that these heat insert nuts are starting to pull out through the HDPE, because I would not be surprised if this one was going the same way as this one. So a different attachment method is going to be needed for this moving forwards, but there's going to be a lot of changes to the weapon package moving forwards because, well, there's a whole thing we haven't yet talked about, but we're getting there. And I say we're getting there because before we get there, we first have to talk about the fact that, again, in this fight, I had the wheel lock up issue where one of the wheels starts going the wrong direction and causes the melting to be problematic. And unfortunately, in this particular instance, my opponent had both a weapon and a good drive when that happened, and so he was way more effective at keeping me away from everything and like pinning me against the walls and stuff than staying alive was, which was not really a good look for the judges. Eventually I do get away, I do manage to get spun back up again, and then something ridiculous happens. The tool steel weapon post that I used to hold on the weapon sheared straight through, just shunk, gone. That it's an S7 tool steel part that should not be happening. Crazy. I have no idea how that happened, why that happened. All I can say is that this melty brain has a lot of power in it. It delivers massive hits into itself. I really need to get better at delivering that energy into my opponent, because right now I'm delivering it into me and it is hurting. Yeah, that's just unfortunately the way of it at this point in time, and this shattered tool steel post really does kind of indicate that. This was also the thing that stopped me from continuing in this tournament. We haven't talked about how the outcome of this fight is yet, win or lose, but I will tell you right now that this damaged post meant that there was no more fights for RUD for this tournament because I didn't bring a spare. I didn't get a spare, I didn't bring one. I didn't think I was going to be able to shatter 8mm thick hardened, well, it's 8mm thick tool steel. I'm not sure if it was hardened or not. But I thought that was outside the realm of possibility for this particular beta weight, and I was very, very wrong on that front. And yeah, so the rest of this fight is just madness because while I'm still managing to spin, I don't have one weapon, which means that the whole robot is wildly unbalanced and is not melting correctly. I'm also upside down, which means that I'm driving really without a heading light. The heading light is kind of pointing down at the ground and is not really showing me what's supposed to be happening. It's also not tracking very well because the whole robot is wobbling like crazy. And of course, I can't spin up the other weapon because if I spin up the other weapon, it's going to gyro like crazy and it's not going to work. So I just have to spin as a weird kind of half weaponized melty and hope that something happens. And thankfully he was still slamming into me over and over again, which was good because we did manage to kind of tweak his weapon and eventually stop it from working entirely. One of the hits there, he kind of like starts sparking or like grinding when his weapon spins back up. You could hear the change in it, and then his weapon does go down towards the end. I was hoping that I'd be good at that point because all the way up until the last 10 seconds of the fight, I still had the weapon belt on the broken side of the melty, which meant that at the end of the fight, I could prove that I had a weapon still, despite the fact that I've, lost one entirely. I still had one, so much like the staying alive fight, I might still be able to eke through on damage on a half weapon versus no weapon. Unfortunately, in the last 10 seconds, the melty brain throws the drive belt or the weapon belt off here, and I think that's because these heat insert nuts release a little bit more and the weapon motor here flops around a little bit, allowing that drive belt to come off this weapon pulley, and the weapon stops working, which means that I go to the judges here without, one weapon assembly entirely, and with this weapon assembly not only not working, but also visibly damaged. I mean, I think Seth himself said it the best here. Yeah, it didn't look good. And look, here's the thing. The judge's decision on this one, on the staying alive fight, I didn't get the judge's decision until I was back up in the pits, starting to look at the robot a little bit. This fight, the judge's decision came through very quickly, and honestly, I feel like that's understandable. When your robot looks like this, and you pull it out of the arena at the end of 3 minutes, if the judges don't call that against you, then your opponent had to be in much worse shape than you, and he just wasn't. He drove a really good fight, he was really controlled, he was really aggressive, and yeah, he should get the damage points as well, because both my weapons went down in very spectacular fashion here. So despite the fact that I did that damage to myself, that should still count for him, and I think it was the right call. And again, even if I'd managed to make it through, this was a problem that we weren't really going to be able to fix quickly, easily, or anything like that. So it was just done at the end of this fight. So that is the two fights that RUD had at Norwalk, and here's the thing, I'm actually pretty happy with how we performed. We made it all the way through to 3 minutes on the judge's decision on both fights, despite having some weird kind of tech glitches partway through each fight, which again, something I will need to work on and fix going forwards. But those were good, fun fights. And there is more stuff happening here at NHRL. There is more videos I'm about to put out on this. If you want to see more of those things, make sure you subscribe because there is a lot of stuff coming up. But also, we're not done for this video. There's a little bit left on that, and that is because the guys from Project Liftoff, especially Jim, he was great. We had some really, really great chats about melties. We swapped some circuit boards that run our melties, which was really, really cool. But he also allowed me to drive Project Liftoff, and I need you to see this.
All right, so up until it starts to spin.
This one?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, see the LEDs over there?
I see them.
You can start drifting.
Oh my god. This is so responsive.
If I was a good driver, it'd be awesome. My son is a better driver. Okay, stop and go to medium. Go ahead and go to medium. Watch the red LEDs as you go to medium. Okay, go. You're at 2,000 RPM right now.
Whoa, okay.
Okay, go drive in the middle. If you can, go back more.
Yeah.
All right. Now, whoa, get away from the metal. All right, go to high, just for a second.
I don't even want to translate.
Go back down to low. And drift a little bit more. Try to avoid the metal.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Alright, shut it down. And you can also, this is the safety, and this does nothing now.
So that was done in the cage that was taken to open source and was just up in the safety area at NHRL, where I spun the melty up for the first time on the Friday. And wow, that thing is so stable. Project Liftoff's heading is just like, it's just brilliant. It's way, way better than this particular melty. So I have a target now. I have a goal to aim for. I'm going to get this melty working that well. It was a little bit interesting because the floor in that arena was so beat up. It wasn't tracking quite as well as it does normally in their fights, but even so, it was translating beautifully, way better than RUD has ever translated. So again, something for me to aim for, and I am just excited to get in and do that. There are some things coming up on this channel where we will work on ways to help me test and improve and build on my melty brain code. So all of that is coming up. Hopefully before the end of the year, we'll get into some hardcore melty brain tweaking and tuning, because I need to be that good. I need to build a robot that can translate quite that well, because that was so good to drive and so much fun. So as I mentioned, that is going to be, well, that's all the fights and interesting little tidbits for this particular video. There is going to be more videos coming out. But as we're at the end of this flight report, I will say, so how I got home for an NHRL, we did the same things that we did to get to NHRL, just in reverse. And yes, that does mean uneating the pizza, but it was well worth it in the end. Anyway, that is going to be it for this video. As mentioned, there is more coming out from my trip to NHRL. So I will see you in the next video.